Paul Britten Austin was an English author, translator, broadcaster, administrator, and scholar of Swedish literature. He is known in particular for his translations of and books on the Swedish musician, singer and poet Carl Michael Bellman, including his prize-winning book The Life and Songs of Carl Michael Bellman. He also translated books by many other Swedish authors. Alongside his work on Swedish literature, Britten Austin spent 25 years assembling a trilogy of history books, 1812, Napoleon's Invasion of Russia, telling the story of Napoleon Bonaparte's failed campaign entirely through eyewitness accounts. Early life. Britten Austin was born in Dawlish, South Devon, England. His parents were the writers Frederick B. Britten Austin and Mildred Ging. He was educated at Winchester College. In 1951, he married novelist Margareta Bergman, sister of film director Ingmar Bergman. They lived in Stockholm, where he was head of Swedish Radio's English-language broadcasting from 1948 to 1957. He directed the Swedish Tourist Office in London between 1957 and 1968, at the same time working on his book on Carl Michael Bellman, The Life and Songs of Carl Michael Bellman. Britten Austin is best known for his work The Life and Songs of Carl Michael Bellman. It describes the life and times of Sweden's bard, the 18th-century singer and poet Carl Michael Bellman. It was the first full biography of Bellman in any language. The Swedish Academy awarded Britten Austin the Special Prize for the book, and its Interpretation Prize in 1979. One reason for this was that it was the first substantial work on Bellman in English. Another is the quality of Britten Austin's writing. For example, in 1768, the year before Oxenstierna had first heard him at Lysander's, or perhaps even a year before that, Bellman had begun to compose an entirely new sort of song, a genre which had no model and can have no successors. These songs were to grow swiftly in number until they made up the great work on which Bellman's reputation as a poet chiefly rests. He called them Friedman's Epistles. To understand the title, it is necessary to go back 20 years. In the 1740s, when Carl Michael was growing up in the Lilla Dorishuset, the man who had been responsible for seeing to it that the finest clocks of court and city kept time was Jean Friedman. He with the penchant for wigs, lavender water and other Frenchified refinements. In the foreword to his Life of Bellman, Britten Austin explains, "This book was born on the spur of a moment, the moment when I realized that there is not, and apparently never has been, a book on Bellman in English. What the greatest of all songwriters, in any language, unknown. Such a gap in general knowledge, I felt, had to be immediately repaired, and although the draughty and unsprung carriages of British railways, commuting on staggering wheel between Victoria and Haywards Heath, are certainly not the best place to cudgel one's brain for rhymes or to elucidate 18th-century Swedish texts, the work was immediately put in hand." Britten Austin argues that Bellman is unique in being a great poet, in setting all his work to music, and in being as great on the page as when he is sung. He comments on the extreme difficulty of making poetry accessible in another language. Verse translation into the original meter is necessary, he argues, because the virtuosity of Bellman's verse structures, wedding his poems to the melodies, is itself the source of much of the dramatic effect. Britten Austin saw Bellman as an infinitely lovable and brilliant genius of the Rococo, whose earthy humanity, not unlike Burns, blends so exquisitely with the graces of his artificial age. Quote, "It is clear that Britten Austin admired and sought in his own way to emulate the many-talented Bellman. Writing in books of broad British style describes the translations of the songs in the book as euphonious, bold, and congenial. She notes that the book provides a thorough overview of the Gustavian age in which the poet lived. 1812, Napoleon's invasion of Russia. Alongside his career and his other writings, Britten Austin spent 25 years working on his detailed 3-volume eyewitness-only account of Napoleon's disastrous invasion of Russia in 1812. He explains he is profoundly skeptical of historians. Quote, "He felt the more readable they are, the less historically reliable, so instead he chose to invent nothing, hardly even a phrase, but instead to resurrect them in their own words." Britten Austin takes 160 people of the many thousands who made up the Grande Armée. I thought, and without any impertinent comments of my own, I might be able to reconstitute, as authentically as ever can be done, 6 months of vanished time. To achieve this, naturally, I have had to take my thousands of vivid fragments, longer or shorter, snip them and put them together in what I came to think of as a marching order, and generally help the reader not to go astray. The result is a uniquely detailed report from the front. Britten Austin used this knowledge to tell the story of a mass grave found near Vilnius in 2002. Reviewing the book in the Rosy Journal, the military historian Charles Esdale described it as vivid and compelling, the most detailed account of the disaster yet to become available in English. Greenhill Books called it a unique endeavor in military history publishing. James Fisher describes the account as like no other in the English language. Austin has combined descriptive prose with quotes from primary sources to produce a readable account. It is similar to the approach that was used by French historians such as Lacouque, Auertel and Houssaye. Translation. Britten Austin translated several books from Swedish to English. He also translated some of Evert Taubes' songs, a selection of which can be found in the singer's autobiography. Some have been recorded by Roger Whittaker, Skorfel Pike, Sven Bertil Taube and Martin Best. Works books The Life and Songs of Carl Michael Bellman, genius of the Swedish Rococo. Alhem, Malmo, American Scandinavian Foundation, New York, 1967. 1812, Napoleon's Invasion of Russia. Greenhill Books, 2000. Gustav Froding, His Life and Poetry, 1986. On Being Swedish, Reflections Towards a Better Understanding of the Swedish Character, 1968. The Swedes, How They Live and Work. The Organ Maker's Wife, 1981. Translations The Locked Room, by Sjöwall and Walu. Pantheon Books, 1973. Dr. Glass by Hjalmar Söderberg. Little, Brown and Co., 1963. Reissued with introduction by Margaret Atwood, Harville, 2003. Autobiography of Evert Taube, I Come From a Raging Sea, 1967. Bergman on Bergman, Interviews with Ingmar Bergman, by Stig Bjorkman, Torsten Mans, and Jonas Siemer. Simon and Schuster, 1973. A History of the Swedish People, by Wilhelm Moberg. 2 volumes, 2005. Friedman's Epistles and Amp Songs. A selection in English with a short introduction, by Carl Michael Bellman. Proprius UNESCO, 1999.